This is Gemara Menachos, Daf Mem Gimel, and rolling on Mem Beis and Beis. We are 2 lines from the white lines as we continue the incredible sugya of tzitzis, and actually, more notably, we'll be discussing tchelas. Says the Gemara Tanarabanon. And again, once again, as Purim is on the horizon, there have those that have been reaching out. Anyone who wants to sponsor the days of Purim, the days before, the day after, incredible days of tefillah, incredible days of tzedakah, please feel free to reach out. Tana Rabbanan says the Gemara, there's no way to check the authenticity of tchelas. And right away we dive into Rashi a little bit higher in the Ami that tells us, we think right now that a person's not able to check whether it is tchelas, or whether, as we've seen, it's kala ilan, it's this blue indigo. And because you can't check, it says the Gemara, ve'ein niches element amocha. Only buy it from a momcha. Only buy it from someone that is reputable, because you can't actually check if it's the real thing. Similarly, says the Gemara, tefillin yesh lahem bedika, ve'ein niches element amocha. Tefillin, yes, have a bedika. A person is able to check to make sure that tefillin are written properly, and still, that's the chiddush as Rashi throws in. You only buy from a mumcha who knows that the ibud, the creation of the ritzuyos and the like, have to be lishma. And finally, sparim emezazais, yesh lahem bedika, and, which I don't know if anyone would have anticipated this one, sifrei Torah emezazais, v'nichem mikol adam, and can be fought for every person. Why? Zak Rashi, because you check it. And there's no din of Ibul Lishman by Sifrei Torah and Mezuzah according to the Shita. And therefore says the Gemara, we don't have to be concerned, and you can buy it from anyone. Now, the fact that this might sound interesting, that really there's no din of Ibul Lishma by Sifrei Torah, Taisus really comes along, and Taisus takes very serious issue with this Rashi, and he argues from Gemara and Gain, etc. Says the Gemara, 2 lines at the bottom, really? Rav Yitzchak, Breder Rav Yehuda, Badik Lei. He did check whether it's appropriate, whether it was real tchelas. Siman Begashem. What would he do? Maisi Mikavya Gila Umaya Deshavilta. What would he bring? You bring alum sap and fenugreek. You always have to have a little bit of fenugreek, and you mix it with a bissel meimei raglayim. From where? Ben arbaim yaim, 40-day-old meiraglayim. Vitari la begavayu, on the top of mem gimel amid aleph. And he would soak it inside this concoction, me'urta v'atzafra, from evening to morning. So the Gemara again says, create a nice potion, put in this dye, put in this item that we're unsure, is it chelas, is it not? And then, Ifrit, on the second line of Gimel Amid Aleph, Ifrit chazute besula, if the color fades, it's possible, Ifrit chazute kshera. And similarly, says the Gemara, V'ravado, Kami de Rav Mishrei de Rav Avira Amar, a different way of checking it. Maisi chamira archasa tisharya, bring hard barley yeast, v'afula begave, and bake it with some threads inside. Ishtana elam yusik sheira. If the color gets better, it's kosher. Ligrius absula of simanech. And what's the siman to know which way it is? Shinoi is sheker. Shinoi is ms. If you change words, you downgrade words, that shows that you're lying. If you upgrade words, that shows that it's the ms. Says the Gemara, so how could we have said on the bottom, as we started today, of Membeis Membeis, that's chelas ein lam bedika? We see clearly there is a bedika. Says the Gemara, what does it mean? My ein la bedika, nami dika amar. What does it mean? Ein la bedika? It means ateima. It means that the wool was the shash, as we spoke about yesterday, that the wool might have been created to test the pigment, and therefore the above ways of proving that it is tcheles, it's not going to show us that it was done l'shem the mitzvah, or maybe it was done l'shem stam the color to test it. And the reason why we said you have to buy it from a mumche is to know that not only is it the right dye, not only is it the right color, but it's done l'shem mitzvah and not done l'shem the color. Says the Gemara, Mar Mamshrei Aisi Techilta. Mar from a place called Mimashki brought Chelas when Vishnei Ravachoi Batkua Bid Rav Yitzchak Bid Rav Yehuda. They checked it with the methodology of Yitzchak Bid Rav Yehuda V'Ifrid Chazuta. And what happened? And the color faded. But then they did the check with Ravada's check. So says the Gemara, we're not sure what's going on over here. One check says it's kosher. One check says it's basal. So Savar, they thought lemifsala, they say it's basal. Like so the first test. Amlu Ravachai, Elahaloi Techalti. Says Ravachai, guess what? This is neither tcheles v'loika le'ilani. What is it? Because it didn't prove to be tcheles and it didn't prove to be kal le'ilan. So what is this item? El shma mina shmuat hadadi yitmar. Must be that these two tests that we started and learned on the top of the Amud, they were taught in conjunction, they were taught together. Meaning what? Hey, Itmar. Hey, Chadebat Kana b'Rav Yitzchak b'Rav Yehuda. When it was checked with the method of Rav Yehuda, which is the first test, Lo Yifur Chazuta. If the color didn't fade, Ksheira Yifur Chazuta. Then check it with the second methodology of by baking it into the least. And then Ishtani lemal yusa, it's a two-step process. It's going to be ksheira. Then ligriusa, it's going to be pasula. So the two tests that we started and learned at the top of the Amud were not two different ways of verifying whether this is tcheles. It was a two-step process. If the first test works, then you go to the second test. Says the Gemara, shalchu mitam, proves the Gemara, shmuata hadadi, Itmar. They learned the same thing. They heard from Eretz Yisrael that these two dinim, these two tests, were taught together. It Ravamani Dayik Vizavin Kechumre Masnita. Says the Gemara, Ramani was midayik, and he would buy techeles like the chumra of the above brisa. Meaning, he would buy the brisa that says that if the tcheles is made for testing, it's possible, it has to be made, and that's why I had to buy it from a mumcha. Amar le'ahu saba, hachi avod kamai dekamach. This was the way of those before you, our ancestors. Vatzliach askayu, and their business was successful. You're doing the right thing. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. Simak in middle of the Yom, the first word on the line is dekamach. Says the Gemara, haloikeach talis mitzuyas min hashuk. You buy a talis with tittis already from the shuk. May Yisrael or even chazkas. Minatagor. If it's from a guy, then minatagor, it's a merchant, it's kshira. Why? We assume he bought it from another yit. Minahed yit psula. V'aval bisha amru einadem rashai limchar tal mitziyas es la'akum. Sheyater tzitzi yoisel. Even though you're not allowed to buy, and even though that which we just said, and even though one is not allowed to sell a garment with tzitzis to a guy unless he undoes the tzitzis, and still, if you buy it from the akum, who's a tagar, we can assume it's kosher, even though there was no one who should have ever sold it to the guy in the first place. Why? My time. Well, what's the reason? Misham Zaina. They made this gzeira because we're afraid of a Zaina. Rav Yehuda Amar Shema Yetalua Imay Badarech V'Yarganu. Another reason is because a yid will join the guy in the road and the guy will kill him. So says the Gemara, two concerns, and therefore that's the reason why we're allowed to buy it from a tagar. What are these two concerns? So Rashi explains we have to be concerned that a guy's going to buy the tzitzis to pretend as if he's a yid, and this might lead to a zayna, a Jewess, a Yiddish zayna, unfortunately, to sleep with him and be over with loises chatin bam, marrying a guy. Or the concern is he might give it as a payment, and therefore, says the Gemara, the halacha is as such. And the second concern is that if a guy wears the talis, a yid might think that he's a yid, travel with him, and the guy will kill him. So says the Gemara, and that's why you can buy it from the Tagar Akum. Rabbi Yehuda Rami Techelta Leparzuma. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda will put chelas to his garment, the anshe beise, of his family members. Now, what does anshe beise mean? We know one's family in Gemara refers to even his wife. Look at Rashi. To the garment that his wife was wearing. Called safra lisate v'tzitzis. And every morning when he put on his tzitzis, he would make a bracha of lisate v'tzitzis. So says the Gemara, let's understand. Medirami kasavar. Sitz Rav Yehuda put tzitzis on his wife's clothing because our mitzvah say sheloi hazman grama. That's why he's giving it to his wife. So if that is true, says the Gemara, my mevar goes avra v'zavra. If it's not a time-bound mitzvah, so why is he making a bracha every morning? The mitzvah never stops. Therefore, you should not make a bracha every day. Explains the Gemara to Rebbe. The Tanya tefillin kol zman shemanichim mavarech aleim. Divrei Rebbe. Tefillin, every time you put them on, you make a bracha, says Rebbe, Gemara and Sukkah that we've learned. Even though it's in mitzvah, which is the entire day, still you make a bracha. Still make a bracha every time you put it on. If this is true, you should make a bracha every hour. Why are we saying he only makes it once a day? Says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda, Inish Sni'ah Have. Rav Yehuda was a man of Sni'as, Lo Shari Leili Glime, Kuli Yaiman. He never took off his cloak the entire day. But Eino if he would have taken it off and put it back on, he indeed would have made a new bracha on his tzitzis. Umay Shina Mi Safra. So why did he make a bracha in the morning? Says the Gemara, when he took off the PJs and he put on his clothing and he put on this beggar with tzitzis, that's when he made the bracha on the tzitzis. So says the Gemara, we just finished saying an interesting line that Rav Yehuda put tzitzis on his wife's beggar. Tanu Rabbanan Hakol Chayavim b'tzitzis, says the Raisa, 12 lines from the white lines. Kahanavim v'Yisraelim ger menashim v'avadim. Tanakama. Rav Shimon Paiter menashim neisha mitzvahs asay shezman gramo. And the classical rule v'chol mitzvahs asay shezman gramo. Nashim peturois. Amar Mar. Hakol chayavim b'tzitzis kanavim v'Yisraelim pshita. Tikayanavim v'Yisraelim petiri. If they were about their man chayiv, who would be chayiv? So it's the Brisa teaching us. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you. Kayanim itzricha leisagad echam in order that oil ksiv. Since it says in the pasuk lo silbashan is semeru b'shtin yachdav kedilim dasilcham. So what would we have thought from this pasuk? Only the one that you're not allowed to wear klayim, as we'll see, which is everyone aside for kayanim belavisha with the mechayev tzitzis. But honey kayanim on the second white line of ishtri kalayim legabayu kayanim allowed to wear kalayim as one of the begadim. The belt of the kayin has kalayim loy lachayev. Kamash Milad that the Brisa says even kayanim are chayev. So says the Gemara Nihid, distributing an avodah. You're right. That whilst they do the avodah, they're allowed to be wearing kalayim. But lo yidin avodah, lo yishtari. But says the Gemara, when they're not doing the avodah, they're not allowed to wear kalayim, and that's the chiddush. That at that point they are chayiv in the mitzvah of tzitzis. Says the Gemara. Okay, so that's the first part of the Brisa. Understanding what the Brisa means and the chiddush of the Kayanim. Now says the Gemara of Shimon Paiter Menashim. The Brisa continued to Rav Shimon says, "Women are part of my time." Rav Shimon did Tanya, or reason my say practice law. It says that you have to see your tzitzis, which comes to say that it's not chayiv a night. Time practice law. Or maybe means to exclude a blind person. That you wear it. Hamani Mekayim reason say brother so slayla. Frag the Gemara the obvious kasha my rise the rabbis ksosuma loitzik so slayla. How do you know? How do you know that you include a blind person's garment and you exclude a nighttime garment? Says Gemara mi Rabba. Says the Gemara Mar bani ksosuma. You know why? Sheyashta beria itzel achirim. Because other people can see it. No one can see it at night. Shita of Rav Shimon that it's a mitzvah say Shizman Grandma women are Baturais. Rabbanan, what are the Rabbanan says? We turn over to Mem Gimel Amid Beis. Hi Asher Techaseba. This that the boss says you cover with him. My of delay. What are they going to do with him? Ibayilei who Lichlitanya. Says the Braisa Mem Gimel Amid Beis. Second line, Asher Techaseba. Says the Braisa, excuse me, L'chtanya. Al arba kanfois kisoscha. Arba v'loy shaloish. Atay arba, you're saying it's four. V'lo v'loy shaloish. Oyena yelo. Oyena yelo. Arba v'loy chamesh. Maybe it's 4 and not 5. Kshuaymer, when the pasuk says Asher Techaseba. Hari balas chamesh amer. When the pasuk says that you covers you, that indicates that we're referring to a 5-cornered garment. Now the classical kasha, how do you know that this is the way? The exact same kasha that we had a moment ago. I include a 5-cornered garment. Because within 5 is 4. That's how the Chachamim learn. Rav Shimon Asher Nafka. And Rav Shimon learns this out from the word Asher. Rabbanan Asher loy mashmi lihu. Okay, so that's what the Rabbanan do with the pasuk of Asher Techaseh. Continues the Gemara, 10 lines down. First one line is Asher. For Rabbanan Ayrizah Moisei Mayav Dilei. What do they do with the Risa Moisei? Mibar Lech Letanya. Risa Moisei Uzachartem. Says the Torah, you should see it and you should be remembered. Rei mitzvah zu uzachar mitzvah chares atzliyaba. See this mitzvah, and through the seeing of this mitzvah, you remember another mitzvah. Veizeh zu kriyishma. What is this? Titinan, as we learned in our Mishnah, meimazayker nishma b'shachris. When you let us see Shachris Shema in the morning, Misha Yakir, when you recognize bin Tchilas Lelavam between blue and white. V'itanya Yidach, and another race that says, reason my soul is Chartem. Rei mitzvah zu, Zchar mitzvah Cheres, as Muchalan, remember another mitzvah. V'izah what is that? Zu mitzvahs Klayim, Dechsev Losel Bashani, Samer Bishni Achtav Yidilum Taselacha. Tani Yidach, a third price, the reason why Yisrael is Chartem is coming to the Shem. Kivjen is Chayev Adam and mitzvah zu, Nis Chayev Echol mitzvahs Kulam. That once you're Chayev in this mitzvah, you're Chayev in all mitzvahs. Rav Shimoni Da'amar, mitzvahs Aseh Shezman Grama. And says the Gemara, this is like Rav Shimon, that he says that tzitzis are mitzvahs Aseh Shezman Grama. It's only during the day. And therefore, the only time you have to put on the tzitzis is when you're makar ben tchilas lavan is during the daytime. And at that moment you're chayiv in tzitzis. You're chayiv v'chol mitzvahs kulam. Says the Gemara, once we're on these brises, tani idach, we quote another. Orisa ma'isay u'zachartem, es kol mitzvahs Hashem. Says the Gemara, famous raid. Shekula mitzvah zo, this mitzvah. Tzitzis is so great. It's weighty. It's equals. Keneged kol mitzvahs kulam. Tani idach. Orisa ma'isay u'zachartem asisem. Raya, maybe lidei zechira, seeing brings to remembering. Zechira, maybe lidei asiyah, remembering brings you to action. Rashbi Amar, kol hazares v'mitzvah zu. Whoever is zares with its mitzvah zeichel mekabel b'nei shechina, absolutely incredible. You zares in tzitzis, you're going to greet the shechina. Ksevach harisa ma'isau ksevasam. Shem alekecha tira v'isai ta'avoid. Tanu Rabbanan, another rice of 3 lines from the medium-sized lines. Hachaviv in Yisrael, beloved are Klal Yisrael, Shesiv v'na Kadosh Baruch Hu b'mitzvos. Hashem blessed us with mitzvahs, tefillin b'rosheihem. Tefillin on our head, tefillin b'zerosei, tefillin on our arm. V'tzitzis b'big day, and tzitzis on our garment. U'mezuzah b'scheyem, and the mezuzah on the doorway. Ve'aleihen, and on these mitzvahs, we're wearing our tefillin on our head and our arm. We have a mezuzah on our house. On these mitzvahs, Amar David. Says David HaMelech, Shavayim behalaticha al mishatei sekecha. Says David HaMelech, Says David HaMelech, Sheva bayayim, 7 times a day. Hilalticha, I praise you al mishatei sekecha. Ubishah, shenichnas David beis hamercha, as David goes to the bathhouse. V'rat ma'im midarim yozevei. No more tefillin, no more mitzvahs. Amar Zok David HaMelech on the second medium-sized line, Ayli, woe is to me, Shamad Aram B'lai Mitzvahs. But then, V'kivan she'nizkar be'emila she'be'bisarai. David HaMelech says it's not true. Even when you're wearing no clothing, you still have mitzvahs with you. You have your bris milah. This yashvu daito. Lach shiyatza, after you left, Amar Aleo Shira. David HaMelech said Shira, she'ne'amar la'menatzeach la'shminis mizmar le'David. Al milah. Shenitna b'shmini, a praise, a shira for the milah that will always be with a mitzvah. Rav Lezman Yaakov Aimer, kol sheish lo tefillin b'roshei, u'tefillin b'zroi, tefillin on your head and your arm, tzitzis b'bigdai, and you're wearing tzitzis, mezuzah b'pischa on your door, akol b'chizik, shalo yechateh. We know he's not going to do an aver shemer v'achayta meshulash, loy b'meir ninatik. V'oimer chayne malach Hashem savav l'reyav, v'yichal etzeim, it surrounds you and he rescues them. Tanya, we learned in a brayso, 5 lines on the wide lines. Hayir meir oimer, man ishtana tcheles kol minei tzevoinim. Why is the tcheles? How is it different than all other colors? It's like the blue ocean. V'yam is the sky. Well, by the time we hear this, it'll have been last week's parsha or 2 weeks ago. So that's why blue, to bring us all the way up to Kisei HaKavod. The punishment for not having white threads is he said to his 2 servants, to one of them he said, bring me a seal of clay. They're both like they didn't bring it. But which one gets a larger punishment? The one that had the cheap seal. Because what was his excuse? So to not have the white threads, which are much easier, there's a greater punishment. Tanya continues the Gemara in the second very wide line. What does Hashem ask from you? And we learn out ma Hashem is like meya. Rav Chia B'Reider Rav Avia b'Shavta b'Yomei Tavi Tarach u'Mamali Lu b'Spar Maki u'Megadi. He was Teireach and he realized, I'm not going to have a bunch of brachas, so how is he going to finish it? How is he going to fill it up with spices and delicacies? Shabbos party and b'samim. Tanya Yeramei Yeramei Chayv on the Var Shalosh brachas b'Chol Yom. Elu ein shasani Yisrael, that you made me a yid, number 1. Number 2, shlasani isha. Number 3, shlasani bor. You did not make me a bor. You didn't make me someone who's completely ignorant. Rav Achbar Yaakov shamal lebrei davikom avar shlasani bor. You heard that bracha? Amar lei kulei hai nami. He said, you should make such a bracha. I understand, even a bar, someone who doesn't have Torah, still has to make brachas Hashem, Amar Lei, what else should I make? Ella, says the Gemara, Shalei Asani Aved, says the Gemara, Hainu Isha. What do you mean? When you say Shalei Asani Isha, it's the same thing as Shalei Asani Aved, as they have the same mitzvahs. Says the Gemara, Eved, Ziltfei, it's not true. An Eved is inferior on the top of Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, and therefore the bracha that should be made, Shloyas Ani Oved, not Shloyas Ani Bar. Stop over here. We'll pick it up from Mem Dalet Amud Aleph for the next year. B'siyata Dishmai.